So week 2 of our summer series, God at the Movies, and you've already guessed what this little clip we're going to watch a little bit is from the movie Blindside. I encourage you to watch the movie. It is inspirational in its own important way. So the message I have for today has kind of got twofold things I want us to be about in the next few minutes. First is to look at Barnabas, and then to also ask the question, who in your life needs you to be a Barnabas with them and for them? So what do we know about Barnabas? Barnabas, we understand from the book of Acts, first was named Joseph. He was from the country of Cyprus. And when he accepted Christ, his name was changed to Barnabas, which actually means the son of encouragement. So already he had a reputation for being an encourager in the lives of others. Second Acts tells us that he was amazingly, sacrificially generous. When the first church gathered after Pentecost, he sold his property and gave the proceeds to the ministry of the church to support its ministry in Jerusalem and the regions and the missions that they were sending people on as time came. He was a very early supporter of Paul. In fact, if you know the story of Paul, Paul first was Saul. And Saul was a Pharisee who was part of the group of people that persecuted the early Christians because the Christians believed Jesus is the Messiah. In fact, he looked on while Stephen was stoned and is potentially responsible for the same decisions for early Christians. And then he met Jesus, truly had a face-to-face with Jesus. His life was changed and his name was changed from Saul to Paul. But you can imagine the leaders of the early church questioning this guy named Paul. Isn't this Saul? And it was Barnabas who went before the leaders and told them and supported Paul and encouraged Paul in his ministry. And it was Barnabas who stood with Paul in the early Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15, as the church was deciding to take its ministry not just to the Jews but to all nations, who supported Paul as he came back with a word of his ministry. In the text we have today, Paul and Barnabas are at a serious disagreement. It's after this Jerusalem council. And Paul turns to Barnabas and says, hey, let's go back and visit some of the churches that we went on a mission with. And Barnabas said, that's a great idea. Barnabas says, I want to take John Mark with us. And Paul says, no way. I'm not having John Mark go with us. You saw what he did to us in Pamphylia when we started a mission there. He left us and deserted us, Paul says, and went back to Jerusalem. I am not having him go with us because if he can't stand the heat, my words, then maybe he doesn't need to be in this kitchen. But Barnabas saw something more in John Mark. Even though he failed, he saw something in someone of promise worth redeeming. And Barnabas said, in an argument with Paul, fine, I'll go with John Mark to Cyprus, and you take someone else who we learn is Silas and go visit the churches that we had already started. And we see in this interaction Barnabas' greatest gift. He was, as they said, the son of encouragement. I learned in reading David Jeremiah's book this week, The Power of Encouragement, that some people define encouragement as the capacity and ability to pour courage into the life of someone else. Now that's kind of easy to do when someone pours courage into you through their encouragement and things go well and you're kind of riding on a high and it's great to be encouraged. But what if you're involved in something and you fail? And yet there's Barnabas still breathing courage into John Mark when others denied his ability and rejected him because of his failure. Who in your life needs you to be a Barnabas for them? Who in your life is struggling? Feel as if they're a failure, that they don't measure up, that does not see the potential of the God who has breathed life inside of them and is waiting for you even now to come alongside and be their Barnabas. Leanne Toohey is a modern-day Barnabas. Leanne is a woman who believed in Michael Orr when others saw him as just some kid from the other side of the tracks, from the projects in Memphis. A risky roll of the dice. They looked, his teachers did it, his educational records, and they doubt that he would even make it in this private school that he had been enrolled in. And one day he's walking home in the rain, and even though she may have heard all of this, she sees Michael Orr in the rain, and something clicks inside of her spirit. It's God saying He needs a Barnabas in his life, even now. And as you watch the movie Blindside, you can't help but be touched by how doggedly and resiliently and aggressively she stands behind Michael Orr when others would deny his capacity, his ability, or when some even tried to use him because, let's face it, he's a big African-American guy. He'd be a great athlete. Why, he could protect the blind side of our quarterback. And then in the scene we're about to show, he goes out for practice in the summertime, and he's doing very, very poorly at playing left tackle. And you see Leanne Toohey there watching, there supporting, and finally getting him face to face and helping even the coach who was doubting his ability so much more as he watched him play and fail at being left tackle. He says, well, at least when we play the first team, when he gets off the bus, they'll think he's big and mean. At least till the whistle blows. But she doesn't stop there.
You got 100 pounds on Carlos and you can't keep him out of our backfield? Hold your block until the whistle blows. Hold it. All right, let's go.
With the camera. Michael always does better when he sees what he's supposed to be doing.
Holding. Left tackle.
Michael, come on.
Or. Come here, son. Hold him inside here between the tips. You got it? Will you look at me, son? If you grab him outside here like this with that horse collar thing you just did, you're going to get flagged and I'm going to be pissed. You hear me? All right, go.
Baby, wash my stuff, all right? Okay.
Well, at least they're looking at coming off the bus. They'll be terrified till they realize he's a marshmallow. Looks like Tarzan plays like Jane.
Give me a minute, Bert.
We're in the middle of practice, Leanne.
Thank me later. Come on. Do you remember when we first met and we went to that horrible part of town to buy you those dreadful clothes? And I was a little bit scared and you told me not to worry about it because you had my back. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
And if anyone tried to get to me, you would have stopped them, right? And when you and SJ were in that car wreck, what did you do to the airbag?
Stopped it.
You stopped it. You stopped it. This team is your family, Michael. You have to protect them from those guys. Okay? Listen. Okay. Tony here's your quarterback, all right? You protect his blind side. When you look at him, you think of me. How you have my back. How you have his. Okay? All right, Tony, go back. All right. Uncle Lumpy here is your tailback. When you look at him, you think of SJ and how you've never let anyone or anything hurt him. You understand me? All right. Go back. Got it?
What about Collins and Mr. Toad?
Fine. They can be on the team too. Are you going to protect the family, Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Good boy. Now go have some fun. Yelling at him doesn't work, Bert. Doesn't trust men. His experience, they pretend to care about you till they disappear.
Want to run a play?
SJ, you're going to want to get this. Okay. Come on. Come on, Michael. Come on. Woo! Yes! Michael!
All right, wake up, wake up.
That boy.
Okay. What'd you say to him?
You should get to know your players, Bert. He tested 98% in protective instincts. I said you could thank me later. It's later, Bert.
There's a lot of lessons we could learn from. I'm out of battery, I think, gentlemen. So I'll try to speak louder while they get this taken care of. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from just watching this movie, you know, or from the experience of Barnabas. Off the top of my head, I think one of the lessons that we can learn is, you know, if you watch the movie, you discover their lives were changed. Even as they were trying to change his life, they discovered their lives were even more richly and deeply changed. The other lesson that maybe we can discover is the lesson that Leanne taught right there during that section. Which is, you know, sometimes you need to get to know someone. Spend time with them, invest your life with them to understand what makes them tick and how they can learn how to help themselves. Because so often in this world, don't we often kind of put people at arm's length, make judgments and assessments about their character, their motivations, their intentions, without ever sitting down with them and getting to know them, to understand their situation, where they came from, what they struggle with, and what will help them rise to be the person God has created them to be. But the one lesson I want you to leave today with about what it means to be a Barnabas in the life of others is this one. That when you are living, when you are loving, and you are encouraging someone, when you are a Barnabas in the life of another, words are not enough. They can help. Sharing a Facebook inspirational post is not enough, although it might bring some temporary comfort and inspiration. Saying we will pray for them, while helpful and a powerful tool for you being uplifted and others encouraged, will not always be enough. Especially if that's one of the standoff tools we use to help others because we're praying for them. The most vital lesson that Leanne and Barnabas teach us about how to be a Barnabas in the life of someone else, to be an encourager, to pour courage into the heart of someone else, is that you must do nothing less than live and give your life. Sacrifice. Love them with your person, with who you are. Be with them. Spend time with them. Pray with them. Encourage them. That's what Barnabas did with John Mark. John Mark failed in Pamphylia. So much so that Paul wanted nothing to do with him. Later on, when you read Colossians, which is a letter that comes later than Acts, you discover that Paul praises John Mark's faithfulness. And tradition tells us, although there is scholarly disagreement, that John Mark may have been the author of the Gospel of Mark, which was written after this experience in Acts that we discovered, that we just read this morning. So imagine if Barnabas had not taken John Mark under his wings, and in the presence of failure had not re-encouraged him, spent time with him, walked with him, and helped him rediscover his calling in Christ. The Gospel of Mark, if he is the author, may never have been written. That's what we in our Christian faith call sacrificially incarnating the love of God. Bob Pierce is the originator of World Vision. We support 2 young children in Africa through World Vision. And shortly before he died of leukemia in Africa, one of his deepest desires was to go and visit the ministry of a man by the name of Borneo Bob because of his great love for the people in Indonesia. And though he was very ill, Bob Pierce went to Indonesia to see Borneo Bob one last time. And when he went there, Borneo Bob took him around and showed him what God was doing among the various missionary outreaches that had been partly financed by World Vision. They were going through some of the villages, and they came to a river, and as they approached the river, they noticed a girl lying on a bamboo mat. Bob Pierce asked Borneo Bob what she was doing there, and Borneo Bob explained that she was dying from cancer and just had a few days to live. Bob Pierce was incensed. Not at anyone in particular, just angry at the whole situation. He asked Borneo Bob, why is this girl lying down here in the mud when she'd be up in the clinic with somebody to take care of her? And Borneo Bob explained that the girl was from the jungle and had preferred to be near the river where it was cooler. She had asked to be put there, so Bob Pierce, the consummate Barnabas, the consummate encourager, went over and got down on his knees in the mud. He took the girl's hand and began to stroke it. And he prayed for her. She didn't understand the thing he prayed for, but she looked up and said something to him. And Bob asked Borneo Bob, what did she say? And Borneo Bob replied, she just said, if I could only sleep again. If I could only sleep again. Her cancer was so painful she couldn't even sleep. And Bob Pierce began to cry. And he reached into his pocket, took out his bottle of sleeping pills, which he needed in order to sleep at night because of leukemia ravaging his own body, and he gave them to Borneo Bob and said, make sure this young lady gets a good night's sleep as long as these pills last. He was 10 days from any city large enough to get any kind of refill so that he could have comfort at night, and yet he was willing to sacrificially incarnate the love of God for this woman, this young girl. Leanne sacrificially incarnated the love of God, was a Barnabas to Michael Orr. He became a first-round draft pick of the Baltimore Ravens. Barnabas saw something in John Mark that Paul at that time in his ministry was willing to ignore and to reject. And because of that, John Mark became one of the standard bearers of faith in the early church. Who is waiting on you to be their Barnabas today? Reach and get your card. There is a principle called the Dunbar Principle. It's not actually named after you, the Dunbar family, but it's a similar name. And the Dunbar Principle says that most of us can really only engage in an active engagement with 5 to 8 people in our lives. We know that's true for immediate families. The Dunbar Principle says there's a whole range of people, 15 to 20 more people, that could be switched in and out of that close circle of people who we care about, are engaged with, who we have enough time and energy and disposition to care about. So I ask you to name 3 and to write them down on your card. 3 people in your life that need you to be a Barnabas with them and for them. And to take your card and to write their name and to pray about them and send them encouraging words and Facebook posts, but especially go invite them to lunch. Invite them to spend time with them. Hear their story and ask God for a way that you can work with God to pour encouragement into them. That might mean inviting them here. Who is waiting for you to be their Barnabas today? Who is waiting for a friend from God?